Until they bring the streetcars back, Chapter 21. Thursday night I bombed over Goodrich to see if Gretchen had come back. I really missed seeing all the kids with school out, and it was like the world stopped or something. I shoveled a lot of snow and delivered groceries, and some of the team sneaked in the old gym at Fort Snelling to play basketball a few afternoons. I thought I ought to ask Katie out at least once to be polite, but I didn't want to make Steve feel bad. There weren't any lights in Gretchen's house, and the sidewalk wasn't shoveled, so I went around through the alley and walked into the backyard. The big oak tree was the kind that kept its dead leaves until spring, and I grabbed the lower branch with my leather mitten and pulled myself up the trunk, climbing until I was level with the second-story dormer. I peered into the window, and I couldn't tell for sure, but it seemed that the curtains were open, and I was staring into the darkness of Gretchen's life. Like a little kid, I sat in the crook of the tree and realized that no one in the house would be able to see me behind the thick trunk and leaves, but I could see whatever went on in that room. Shivers ran down my legs when I thought about what that might be, and I remembered Gretchen's words, "You have to see it." I perched in the big oak for a while, trying to come up with some way I could help her, but I stared, freezing my buns off, and I slid off the tree and took off for home. New Year's Eve, my parents went to bed around 10, as if my father dreaded the coming year. Tom was having a party at his house, but I still felt pretty lousy about not going to the dinner dance with Lola, and I sure didn't want to start the new year watching those two together or be reminded of what a sap I'd been. I made Peggy beg me about 73 times before I said I'd play rummy with her. Darn, I knew all my friends would be at Tom's and I'd be sitting at home with my little sister. Peggy and I made popcorn and drank root beer and played at the kitchen table while we waited for midnight, and she could tell I wasn't about to bust out singing. Are you feeling sorry for yourself, Cal? I don't know. I guess so. If anyone else had asked, I denied it, said I was fine. She picked up a 7 and stuck it in her hand. Mom says we aren't supposed to feel sorry for ourselves, just for other people. I know, I said, and I discarded a queen. I feel sorry for myself sometimes, she said. You know what I do? She picked up the queen and laid down 3 of them. What? I just say, spit on it. Around 11, someone knocked on the back door. When I opened it, Steve stood there, out of breath and his hair mussed, like he'd been gimping pretty fast. Jerry said you were home, Steve said in his booming voice. Yeah, but not so loud. My parents are asleep. I guess he'd been drinking. What are you doing? Steve asked, all excited. Playing rummy with my sister. I backed into the kitchen. Steve stepped in and I shut the door behind him. Oh, swell, he said. Hi, Peg. He seemed to calm down a couple notches when he saw her. Hi, she said. Do you want to play rummy? That'd be hunky-dory. Steve planted himself at the table next to Peggy and I and could tell she was proud that he wanted to play with her, and she shuffled the cards with a big smile on her kisser. Where did you see Jer? I asked as I sat with them. At Tom's. Are there many kids there? Yeah, the house is jammed. I could tell that neither of us wanted to talk about Tom's party, and I guess that Katie must be there with someone too. We played for almost an hour, and Peggy was thrashing us, and I figured Steve was shyly discarding whatever Peggy was saving. Does your leg hurt much? Peggy asked. No, only if I run around too much. I sure hope I don't get polio, she said. I wanted to tell her to pipe down. You won't. You're a good kid, Steve said. He studied his hand. I quit hockey. Quit, I said. How come? The coach plays me 'cause he's afraid people will think he's a bum if he doesn't. The players don't say anything, but I'm losing games to them. Hermanson's a better goalie than I am. I'll bet you're the best goalie they have, Peggy said. Don't quit, I said. It's not just the goalie that loses games. Maybe you can use both of you, switch you around. No, as long as I'm on the team, he'll think he has to play me. I'm tired of hockey anyway. I knew he was lying. He loved playing hockey. I wish you'd keep playing, Steve, Peggy said, and I sure liked my little sister right then. When it was about 11:45, Steve bounced up like he just remembered something. I gotta go. Aren't you gonna stay till midnight? Peggy said. Nah, I gotta go. Thanks for the popcorn and stuff. He ducked out of the door and was gone. We hung on until the stroke of midnight in 1950 came in quietly for us. Cal, 1949 can never come back, ever, Peggy said. She went to bed a few minutes later. thinking it was a pretty big deal to welcome in a new year, and I felt like hugging her, but I didn't. Just as I snapped off the light in the kitchen, I heard a knock at the back door. Steve? I went to the door in stocking feet and my shirt pulled out and all unbuttoned. Sandy was standing there like she'd just fallen off a bridge. Hi, Bean. Can I talk to you a minute? Yeah, sure. She stepped into the kitchen, her face streaked with tears. What's the matter? I said, and she slumped into a chair. You're my best friend, Bean. You've always been, and I feel so bad. I was at Tom's, and Scott showed up with Katie. Oh gosh, I'm sorry. Maybe she asked him. No, I found out he asked her. I thought we had so much fun at the dinner dance together, and then just 4 days later, I sat at the table, and when she pulled off a new leather glove and saw her chewed fingernails, she slipped it back on. Remembering how your tongue was stuck to that fence, she said. Oh golly, I'll never forget how. That's how it feels, only in my heart. I need someone to pour bean soup over my heart so it won't be stuck on Scott. Boy, I wish I could, Sand. I wish you could too. It really hurts. It really hurts. I sat there like a doornail and couldn't come up with any happiness stuff, and I felt like waking my mom. Then Sandy perked up a little. When I was downtown last week, I saw a lady who looked just like me, and I went up to her and told her I was adopted. What did she say? She said that was nice, that she and her husband thought of adopting once, but then they had 4 kids of their own. I wondered if she'd ever thought that her real mom and dad might be dead, but I didn't say anything. Do you think there's something wrong with me? She said. Heck no, there's nothing wrong with you. What do you mean? Why didn't my real mother and father keep me? These people were always asking me questions I couldn't answer, and I felt like I was flunking life. And she must have thought Scott didn't like her because she was something basically wrong with her, like a big ugly wart or something. I don't know, I said. Maybe they were poor and couldn't feed you and buy you clothes and things, and they wanted you to have a good life or something. I wouldn't have had eaten much, Bean. I didn't need much. It got so quiet in the kitchen, it was like the world had run out of answers and I couldn't look for her. I've got to get home, she said, and she was gone. Lying in bed, I wished I could have done something for her, and I was feeling pretty lousy, and I worried about the coming year and year we'd graduate and scatter. The year Jerry and I would join the Navy, the year when everything would change. The papers kept blabbing about the tidal wave of communism conquering the world, and it was always saying that an atomic war was going to wipe out the whole human race, like the guy writing in it was happy about it or something. Sometimes I tried to imagine what it would be like to get fried by an atom bomb, and it was scary. With my father's job hanging by a thread and Gretchen more and more scared that she'd go crazy, it was no wonder I worried sometimes. But even with all of that, I still kept thinking about Lola. In a roundabout way, I told her I loved her at the dinner dance, and I couldn't help wonder what she'd do about that. I felt good when I scrambled in the door at the school and heard everyone yakking and slamming lockers and laughing like life had started again and everything was okay. I wanted to see if Gretchen made it back, and I zipped into the basement and shoved my way through the hallway where kids were stuffing coats in their lockers and hanging around for the first bell. Up ahead, I spied her standing by a locker, staring into it while a bunch of boys were looking at her and laughing. As I got closer, it looked like most of them were freshmen or sophomores. Hey, Gretch, want to go to the dog show with me? We could win, I heard one of the kids say, showing off for his buddies, and they hooted and poked each other. In the hubbub of the crowded hallway, no one noticed me, and I stood there for a minute like I couldn't believe it. Where do you buy your clothes, cutie? In Poland? Gretchen just kept looking into her locker. Arf, arf, arf. Here, Gretch. Here, girl, one boy said, and patted his leg. That did it. I curled a fist and was ready to give the kid a fat lip, but on the spur of the moment I shoved my way through the circle and acted like I hadn't noticed them. Hi, Gretchen. Ready to go? When she heard my voice, she turned and looked at me like I dropped in from the moon. Hi, she said, and she glanced at the kids around her like she was ashamed to have me see what was going on. Let me carry your books, I said, and I held out my hand. She was a she was as blasted as the little pricks who were picking on her, and she handed me her binder in social studies. The kids stood there with their mouths hanging open, and I knew they recognized me. They probably cheered their guts out at the Wilson game. and I remembered how I looked up to the senior athletes when I was a freshman. They glanced sideways at each other like they'd been caught with their pants down, and none of them knew what to do with their hands or face. Gretchen closed her locker, and the circle opened for us to pass. Some of the jerks slunk away into the crowded hall, and others began making excuses to each other. And I got a bang out of it because I could see in their eyes that they were wondering how in the heck a dog like Gretchen Letterman could have one of the jocks of the senior class carrying her books. I took her arm and escorted her up to the front hall where she'd be safe for a while. Does this happen often? I said. Sometimes. I was surprised that anyone at Central would be that mean to her. Golly, I knew that behind her back some kids called her Gretch the Wretch, but no one said it in front of her. Did they? None of the kids I knew would. How was it for you up north? I said, with your dad and everything. She didn't look at me. Oh, I don't know. Geez, the way she said it scared me. Like she'd given up and she was thinking about going crazy. Right then, I knew I couldn't put off doing something any longer. I'd let it slide, hoping for some big miracle, hoping some adults would notice her and step in and do something. What was wrong with everybody? Were they all blind? I watched her head off for her homeroom, and then I hustled for mine, thinking about how close I came to hitting that kid and realized I could have been kicked out of school. That afternoon practice was lousy and we tripped and fumbled all over the gym, and I knew we should have been practicing like mad all through vacation. Only two more practices before the Washington game and we were being touted as the team to beat for the city championship. And Mulligan kept us running 20 minutes over if that would make up for laying off for 2 weeks. It was late when we finished showering, but I had Jerry drop me at Latcher's drugstore and I was dead set on making the call before I went home. From the phone booth in the drugstore, in case they could trace the call, I dialed the police and I couldn't keep my hand from shaking. Police department. Sergeant Thompson, a man's deep voice answered. I know a man who beats his daughter. You want to make a complaint? Yeah, sorta. Just a minute, Thompson said and went off the line. I waited and my stomach was squirming. Sergeant Riley speaking. Can I help you? A younger, gruff voice asked. I almost hung up. I want to tell someone about a guy who beats his daughter. Okay, go ahead. Who am I talking to? I can't say. I was scared stiff and I started feeling like I'd done something wrong just talking to the cop. Well, who's the man who beats his daughter? Riley said. I can't tell you. Listen, if this is a prank. No, please, it isn't a prank. I can't tell you his name unless you promise you'll lock him up. Otherwise, he'll hurt her real bad. Okay, okay, tell me about him. He beats her, but she's so afraid of him she'll never tell anyone. And he's careful not to leave bruises or to keep her home until they heal up. I've seen some of the marks on her legs. Anything else? I think he does bad things to her. Like what? Bad things, like touching her and, sex things. I had my hand on the lever ready to hang up in a second. How do you know? Did she tell you this? Not exactly, but she's afraid she'll have a baby. I couldn't think of anything more to say. Darn it, it seems like much on it's didn't seem like much on the phone. Listen, what did you say your name was? I didn't. I can't. Riley was clever. Okay, whoever you are, I know you want to help, but you got to give me the guy's name. I promise we'll just keep an eye on him. If you want to say is true, we can nab him and lock him up. But from what you've given me, we can't do anything. Can't lock up a man and then check into him. You can see that. Get this girl to come to us. Can you do that? No, she'd never dare. Even if you lock him up for a while, she's sure he'll get her when he gets out. I've never seen anyone so scared. I didn't know how far I dare go. Her sister told the police once, but they didn't believe her. Then he did something really bad to her and she went crazy, ended up in the insane asylum. I won't give you his name unless you promise you'll protect her. Darn, the more I thought about Gretchen, the madder I got, and I wasn't as scared to talk to the cops. Listen, fella, you think about it. My name's Sergeant Riley. I'm on from 3 until midnight, Tuesday through Saturday. Give me his name and we'll check him out quietly. He'll never know it unless we have something to arrest him. Riley sounded like a good guy and I wanted to trust him. But it was Gretchen's pain I was gambling with, and maybe I was starting to believe her life. All right, I'll think about it. Thanks a lot. Goodbye. I hung up and hustled out of the drugstore. Did Riley keep me on the phone to trace the call? I pulled my jacket collar up against the cold and ran along Fairview for home, expecting squad cars to come screeching up to the drugstore with cops piling out. I kept looking back down the street to the intersection in front of Latcher's, but when I turned up the alley 2 blocks away, no cop cars had showed up.